Hello everyone, I'm Simon Ford of Ford's Gin. Martinis, gin and tonics, Negronis, great classic cocktails is what I'm about. But I also love to hear of great recipes from great bartenders from around the world, which is why we've partnered with Beyond the Drink for this season. Cheers.
Well, you just heard from the man himself, Simon Ford, and this season of Beyond the Drink is presented by Ford's Gin. I'm Cappy, and this is a segment where some of the best bartenders in the country explain the stories and recipes behind their favorite drinks. To get the recipe from this episode, check out the episode notes in your podcast player or go to beyondtheplatepodcast.com. Beyond the Drink is a production of Beyond the Plate. All right, everyone, for this episode, we're talking with Christian Suzuki, aka Suzu. Suzu was born and raised in San Francisco. You can find him on Instagram at Suzu Vroom. That's at SUZUVROOM. Suzu's going to walk us through, what else, a gin cocktail. Please enjoy this episode as we go beyond the drink with Suzu. All right, Suzu, tell us what we're drinking today, buddy.
How's it going? So we are going to be making a Mikoshi Negroni. This is a slight take and variation on a classic Negroni. Mikoshi is a Japanese word for kind of like a portable shrine. So I'm going to give a little backstory over here real quick. I was born here in the Bay Area, but I also grew up in Tokyo as well too. And over the last, 31 years, I hate saying my age, I've gone back and forth from visiting my grandparents and my mom, my brother in Japan to even living there. Here and there. So when I last lived there, I think I was 18 and 19 and got really involved with this really famous festival called the Sanja Matsuri. And this is pretty much one of the biggest traditional festivals that goes on in my neighborhood of Asakusa in Tokyo. And it's pretty much a celebration of the three men who created the Sensoji Temple, which is like a really iconic temple in Tokyo, just a few minutes away from our house. And for 3 days, there's a huge festival and celebration where you carry these portable shrines that are called Mikoshi. And you kind of just like run around the neighborhood. You start out like 6 o'clock in the morning, eat a bunch, drink a bunch, carry these crazy 2-ton shrines and have an incredible time. And it's exhausting, but it's fun and it's celebratory. It's seriously one of the most exhilarating moments of my life. And I've been very fortunate to be able to partake in this festival 2 times in my life. Most people aren't able to just show up and be a part of it. You either have to be a part of the festival committee or you're in the Yakuza. It's one of those two. There isn't really much option out of that. So I've been very fortunate to be a part of that. So the Mikoshi Negroni is pretty much kind of my imagination, what I would like to have drank during this festival in the hot, late spring, early summer season. So the Mikoshi Negroni is going to start off with 1.5 ounces of gin. I would prefer something that's obviously juniper forward. I would not want something that's too overpowering because I think that this is a very kind of delicate take on a Negroni. So I really like Ford's a whole lot because it is full bodied. It's voluptuous. There's a small floral element to it as well too, with the jasmine notes in there too. And then that's going to be paired off with a 0.75 ounce of Mancino Sakura Vermouth. If that's not accessible, you can always substitute that with something like Lillet Rosé or any other really kind of full-bodied, almost juicy floral blanc or dry vermouth. Obviously, Sakura is kind of a iconic flower to Japanese culture, so the two kind of pair really well together, the gin and the vermouth. And then just to kind of bring it down to earth a little bit, not make it super full like a flower bomb, there is, of course, the addition of 0.75 ounce of Campari to really, a little tribute to the classic Negroni. On top of that, there are 2 additional ingredients in there. There is an organic strawberry. We call that ichigo in Japan. And the strawberry is kind of one of the most celebrated fruits of Japan. We kind of eat it year round, whether if it's during the winter time, where it's you'll see a lot of desserts out there that feature strawberry, whether if it's mochi or even a cake or whatever. And of course, during the summertime, it's almost kind of bringing a present to a child or a family. If you go to someone's house, bringing a basket of strawberries is kind of a big deal. So I love strawberries in cocktails, especially when it's in reference to my Japanese heritage. And for me, strawberry and Campari is just an awesome combination. And just kind of the wild card ingredient is 1 Makrut Lime Leaf. I love the combination of strawberry and lime leaves. I kind of use this combination of flavors in a lot of Negroni variations that I make, or even Boulevardier variations. Just that kind of zing and zest that you get from the lime leaf really cuts through the sweetness of the strawberry. It kind of sings alongside the Campari. So for me, it all just kind of makes a whole lot of sense. Though lime leaves are not traditional to Japanese culture, it does kind of like pay homage to, Asian ingredients altogether. And it just sings beautifully in a Negroni variation. So that is my Mikoshi Negroni.
Sounds incredible. So many questions. I was like closing my eyes, like listening to this. All right, take us through it. So mixing up, we have all these ingredients. Take us through kind of the method on how this all comes together.
Totally. So this is, I don't quite see this often in most cocktail bars, or at least anymore, but I love using fresh produce in stirred cocktails. I'm very lucky to be from a place like California where we have incredible produce all year round. And when I think of, whenever I see bars that feature fresh or local produce in their cocktails, they tend to be on the more kind of like gimlet or daiquiri or whiskey sour style of drink. I have kind of a sensitivity to citrus, so I typically go for my more spirit-forward cocktails like a Negroni or a martini. Manhattans, old fashions, those are all kind of more under like the category of cocktails that I would tend to drink. But I'm also a sucker for local produce. I'm a sucker for seasonal produce. And I have always loved incorporating fresh fruits into, or even vegetables or herbs or spices, whatever it is, into even stirred cocktails. So for this cocktail, I start off by muddling one organic strawberry. And I want to go organic because organic typically tastes a little bit better. They're a little bit more juicier. And hopefully if you're buying organic too, that means you're probably ordering or buying from someone who specializes in strawberries, or maybe it's just the season that they're really focusing on that. And then just one lime leaf, I tear that apart and just kind of gently muddle that in there as well too. Lime leaves, you don't really have to do a whole lot to them. You can even just like throw it into the cocktail, give it a stir, and let the ice and all the other ingredients kind of just naturally muddle the leaves together, and you'll still get the really incredible oils and essences from the lime leaf. But then of course you add your Campari, your vermouth, your gin, give that a stir. This is one of those cocktails where you are going to have it's going to be a very fibrous cocktail. And that's not really like what I'm looking for in a stirred drink. I really want to have something that's silky and smooth and almost like, I use the word voluptuous a whole lot in cocktails, and I think that's a word that people don't use enough in my opinion, but I am looking for something that's like juicy and voluptuous. So I double strain that cocktail to make sure I really get all of the strawberry particles away, and if in case I have any lime leaves floating around, I'll remove that as well too.
Yeah.
And then of course serve that on a nice big rock. In my case, I don't have any nice fancy rocks at home, so I have a glass that has like a piece of like fake glass ice built in, and you can just keep that in the freezer and pour it into that, and boom, it's delicious. It's gonna keep your drink nice and ice cold. If I had a nice ice block, then it would gently kind of dilute my cocktail and still taste absolutely delicious and bright, and something that I wish I had in hand during these festivals in Japan.
Yeah, there you go. I feel like I've bought some of those like silicone ice cube molds on Amazon. Obviously, I'm not going to get like a clear, beautiful ice cube like you probably use in your bar, but just, something fun if someone's mixing up a drink at home. But you mentioned you like the large cube because it like slowly dilutes the drink. When would someone want to use like the large cube versus like a cup of ice?
For me, I feel like I am one of those kind of bartenders that I try to be approachable and I try to make sense of like certain things. So for me, in the most best perfect world, I would rather have everything served on a big cube, like when it comes to cocktails served on ice. And then my other option would be crushed ice. That's just me. Like if I could have all my water, all my coffee, all my, any other cocktail that requires like ice that's not pebbled, or that's not large, I would rather have pebbled or crushed ice personally. So for me, it's like one or the other. So, but yeah, I also don't think that there's a wrong answer when it comes to cocktail development, cocktail consumption. If you don't have certain things, then you can definitely, adjust your recipe or adjust your presentation to whatever makes you happy. I think that's a huge takeaway for me, especially in the last year. I don't want to, segue too far away from it, but I've had the very lucky fortune of being able to teach virtual cocktail classes all throughout this entire pandemic. I think I actually had my last one yesterday. I was supposed to have one today and I canceled it. But one of the things that I really, really had to relearn and really embrace was bringing myself back down to earth, talking in a way where every home bartender will be able to understand and, really applying, or I guess putting myself in their position or their shoes. So using verbiage that makes complete sense to them, using tools that they have at home. So, maybe big ice is something that's not an option, and that's totally fine. It does not mean that your cocktail is going to taste better or worse.
I love that, Suzu. What a great explanation, and cheers to you. That's so smart, your approach there. That's, making it accessible for the home cook, the home bartender,
right.
If you will. It's fantastic. So Lime Leaves, you mentioned, I feel like you're in San Francisco and out on the West Coast, you guys could get like fresher produce in a local pharmacy than, other parts of the country can get. But can you, typically speaking for someone, if they're in, a lot of major cities have these, but also small towns have them. Could you potentially find something like this in like an Asian market?
Oh, totally. I mean, obviously I'm very lucky to be here in the Bay Area where we have different kinds of produce everywhere left and right. I've definitely been able to find lime leaves in larger health-centered grocery stores like Whole Foods. But, if you don't have a lime leaf or you can't find a lime leaf, you can still make this excellent cocktail by maybe peeling a little bit of lime peel, like lime skin, and throwing that in there. You'll still get that same sensation. A lot of the cocktails that I produce, I don't look at them as you have to follow a particular ingredient or, it has to have this, and that. But I almost look at it as an idea of a drink. So for me, the Mikoshi Negroni is a cocktail that's a Negroni variation, but B also has some juicy succulence and something sharp in there. So maybe if strawberries are not available, I can substitute that for something else, like maybe a strawberry liqueur or maybe perhaps raspberry or something. And if I don't have a lime leaf, a lime peel will work totally fine as well too. So there are more concepts and ideas than the actual straightforward ingredients and recipes, I would say.
Yeah, I love your point of view on cocktails, Suzu. Really, I got so excited just doing a little research on you and what you've come up with and what you've done before we hopped on here. I know you were called, was it last year, 2020, one of the most imaginative bartenders, which that really shows because your stories, as you're explaining this and the story behind it, and the more I dug around getting info on you, your cocktails, you're big on like stories behind them. And I think that's a really great thing. And it probably comes through when a guest drinks your cocktail. I guess with all that said, cheers to you for all that. But where do you draw inspiration? Do you get inspired hiking, to come up with a cocktail or when you see an ingredient, or what is it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've always had a pretty strong sensory memory. So like you mentioned hiking, very quick side story. Long ago, I used to teach wilderness survival on Catalina Island, so off the coast of LA. And the island, it's about like a 45-minute boat ride away from San Pedro. Some of the things that I remember the most about the island are like the smells, the aromatics. So you get lots of fennel, which fennel is not at all native to that island. It was brought by, birds or whatever. I actually have no idea how fennel got there, but fennel is the one thing that I always remember. And then on top of that, there's eucalyptus. And on top of that, you've got, the smell of seawater. So things like that, definitely it might not on paper sound like it'll all come together, but they made sense to me because I was living and breathing all those aromatics. So I kind of apply that mentality to a lot of the stories of my life. So I'm also very lucky to have a lot of kind of stories and life experience when it comes to the restaurant and bar industry. I grew up within this industry. I don't want to get super, super deep into it, but pretty much my grandparents started a restaurant and bar business out in Japan, in Tokyo, back in the 40s, immediately after the war had ended. So their success from that first restaurant went on to opening up a total of 5 restaurants, a cocktail bar, and a ranch that sourced all of their own proteins and produce for their businesses. So restaurants have been in my DNA, in my blood. I grew up into them. So whenever I think of like my childhood memories of like being in Japan, I think of like the smell of, cooked mushrooms, maybe some secondhand smoke, and maybe like garlic that came from the restaurant across the street or something, and this like, urban atmosphere of Tokyo. So I'm always drawing inspiration from the things that I remember or the smells or flavors that I affiliate with a certain memory.
That's so cool. And you've worked in quite a few bars. Many bartenders have, because sometimes you guys are working at 1, 2, 3 bars all at the same time.
Very guilty of that.
So do you remember like the first drink you created that made it on a menu?
I do, actually. I was first hired at the 15 Romolo in San Francisco. This is kind of, technically I worked at a nightclub in Tokyo for like a month, but I don't like talking about that. But I worked at 15 Romolo, and I started off as a cocktail server. I was 21. I didn't know anything about spirits or cocktails. I think I remember my then boss asking me during the interview, like, what is your knowledge in cocktails and spirits? And I said, I just take shots of whatever's in front of me. So that was like how much I knew about anything in the cocktail and spirits world. But one of his goals was really to try to make his cocktail servers to be better bartenders than half the bartenders in San Francisco. So we got trained really, really intensely on the knowledge of spirits, classic cocktails, the approach of modern cocktails, the approach of combining flavors together. So I think for me, my first cocktail that I put on the menu over there was like a mezcal, lavender, chartreuse situation. I don't quite remember everything that was in there, but I remember that one was inspired by a painting of Frida Kahlo that I saw. So I don't remember the whole circumstance of like where I was or what I was smelling or whatever, but that was my first cocktail I put on there, the Frida Kahlo.
I love it. Is that what you called it?
I did, yeah.
That's awesome, man. You're such a joy to talk to. So I want to switch gears. A big part of this podcast, as we were talking a little bit before, is how our guests give back to their community. And I think a lot of people know chefs and restaurateurs give back, whether it's donating a dinner to their restaurant or donating 500 portions of something to an event or being part of an actual, nonprofit organization. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is that the people making their cocktail at a restaurant also give back in a huge way and support causes, whether it's through their voice, through their time, through their wallet. I know you have this pop-up going on right now, and I saw one of the biggest pledges for it is to uplift, support, cross-promote, and collaborate with other communities and hospitality workers who identify as POC, LGBTQ+, of all genders, immigration statuses, and physical and developmental working conditions through events and fundraisers.
Yes.
So I would love to, it's a mouthful, but it's an incredible.
Thank you.
I would love to give you a moment to shed some light on whether it's a specific organization or causes that you want to shine a light on or raise awareness for.
Yeah, definitely. So I talk a whole lot, so I apologize for that. But the first thing is, yes, I just launched a pop-up series called Kagano Pop-Up. I mentioned earlier that a part of my grandparents' kind of like little mini restaurant bar empire that they operated. One of them was called Kagano Bar, which was a bar that my grandmother owned back in the 50s and 60s. Of all their businesses, this was the least successful one. If anything, the most controversial one at that time. My grandmother got a lot of backlash for being a woman, owning a bar, being in a bar, because at that time you didn't see a whole lot of women in bars in Japan. So she had always kind of like told me about some of the struggles that she had experienced within her local community based off of just her gender. My mother, when she immigrated here to the US, she got a lot of backlash for being an immigrant, opening up a restaurant in America, as that was, I guess, a threat to the, citizens who have an American dream, but my mom also had an American dream too. So that was always kind of like something that my mom had to remind me as well too. And for myself, I've always had I don't want to say a struggle, but my road to where I am today has been a lot more longer with a lot more obstacles because of who I am, being biracial, being a part of the LGBTQ plus community. So all in all, I've always wanted to just be able to help and uplift other people who might not have it as easy as this, and that person. So my Kagano Pop-Up is really about creating cocktails, showcasing cocktails that are my cocktails, really based off of my sensory memories, based off of my experiences in my life. And also a huge ode to my grandmother, to my mother, to my heritage, and to like pretty much just everything about me. But alongside with having that pledge as well too, and being able to collaborate and work and cross promote with everyone that I would like to. So I launched that pop-up in 2020 and then the pandemic happened. So kind of like maneuvering that pop-up to other kind of platforms was a little difficult, but I was able to make that work. I had 1 or 2 pop-ups in 2020, but 2021, I had my first pop-up in Oakland. And with all the recent attacks against the AAPI community, I really wanted to do something that was going to help them out, literally like help them out. So I had pledged to donate all of my tips from this one pop-up. I was very, very surprised by the outcome of my pop-up. It was, I think, like top 3 busiest shift I've ever worked in my life. And part of it was like, I thought it's a Monday, it's the pandemic, no one's going to show up, no one wants to go out. And I didn't bother like batching any of my cocktails, which was a huge mistake. And of course I had a shaken, a stirred, a thrown, and a built cocktail. So all different techniques. With that being said, though, by myself in less than 4 hours, I was able to raise almost $2,000 for the AAPI Community Fund on GoFundMe. And that I remember getting very emotional, thinking like, it's not just me who cares. There's other people who care too. And sometimes, it's hard to just like pick and choose a certain, group that you want to help out. So for me, these pop-ups mean a whole lot because every single pop-up that I plan on doing this summer, I really want to focus on a different group that does need help. So my next pop-up I will have at my bar, Wild Hawk in San Francisco at the end of June. And that one is going to be a collaboration with APNEC, which is a grassroots organization building queer and trans America or trans Asian and Pacifica Power here in the Bay Area. It's kind of hard to just choose one group, but I'm just one person running my little pop-up, and I believe in the power of people. So just really kind of bringing awareness to everyone, to my communities and the communities around me as well too.
You're amazing. Your power of one is extreme. Don't underestimate your power of one. And clearly your power of one is a lot more because people are coming out on Monday night to have a cocktail and support you. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it's good stuff. All right, let's do a speed round.
Oh, gosh.
Name the cocktail that inspired you to get behind the bar.
I want to say a highball, but I think it was umeshu and milk, which is not the most amazing combination, but that's what Grandpa and Grandma made me.
That's so funny. What's the last cocktail you made at home?
A Negroni.
Name a smell behind the bar that you love.
Secondhand smoke. I don't smoke, but I love that smell.
Hilarious. Name a smell behind the bar you hate.
Mildew.
One cocktail every home bartender should have in their repertoire.
Take on their perfect martini, because you can make a martini a majillion different ways and you just got to figure out how to make it for you.
Love it. All right, let's close it out with what 3 words would you use to describe yourself?
Effervescent, bittersweet, and jovial.
Amazing. Suzu, thank you so much for your time. I was super jazzed to talk to you. I need to get out to the West Coast to try your cocktails. I hope you continue scribbled notes and ideas and everything you do to make these cocktails come to life and tell a story, because they all seem so special in their own way. But I'm really, really excited for this episode. I'm really excited to make this cocktail. It was a pleasure to meet you. Please keep in touch.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I'm super excited as well, too. And hopefully, actually, I might have a pop-up in Chicago. I've been talking to a couple other people. As I mentioned, I was in Chicago before the pandemic and became really great friends with some folks out there. So hopefully I'll be stopping by sometime this year.
Good stuff. Keep in touch and let me know if you need anything out this way.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, buddy. Have a good rest of the day. To get the recipe from this episode, check out the episode notes in your podcast player or go to beyondtheplatepodcast.com. This episode was produced by myself along with Ian Cohen, Joel Yetton, and Sean Petrosian. Find me and keep up to date with this podcast across all social media platforms at On Cappy's Plate or go to beyondtheplatepodcast.com. Beyond the Plate is on all the socials at BT Plate Podcast. Please rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast on your listening site of choice. Thank you for listening to Beyond the Drink, a production of Beyond the Plate. I'm Cappy.